When you order a kit from me, you'll be getting these 27 parts included in the kit. In the instructions is a complete list of the additional items you need, and for the most part they include the turnbuckle, power supply, a cake pan, of which this one's already been cut down, motor, a 1/4 inch rod to bend for the cartridge holder, the controller, and it comes with the knobs and an on-off switch, and of course an assortment of screws to mount it all up, and of course wood to create the box. Okay guys, I want to show you the differences between my now new version 3.0 gearbox versus the old 2.2. A little history. On my 2.0 version, I had a complete plastic axle, plastic nut, plastic washers that held the drum on. So unless you were careful, and I have a video covering this, unless you're careful, sometimes these parts melt if there was too much heat transfer into the drum. Well, I tried to solve that problem with my 2.2 version, and which takes an actual nut and washer, but the thing is, there was still necessary to have contact as a stop against this plastic. So even though we had a metal nut and a metal washer here, which helped soak up the heat, there were some instances where people still ended up melting this, and so I wanted to come up with a solution for that. So this is the old gearbox, which is 2 bearings, and one bearing on each side, and being 1 bearing, obviously 2 bearings give you more stability, so I was actually relying on part of the box up here for support, which is not optimal. Well, what I've done is I've come up with version 3.0. This one is a 4 bearing design, or 2 on each axle, much more sturdier. I've completely eliminated the plastic contact with the drum, because now here we got a stopper nut that is actually able to adjust with the drum, and this isn't the correct drum for it, but anyway, the drum will go over with another nut and a washer, so there's no plastic into contact with this. I'll show you. And also for added stability, of course, I've got this bearing brace up front. So let me just cover you how this is. So we've got our 2 bottom bearings, and on the cartridge drum side, this is an axle, but it obviously does not spin on it because we got the inner bearing race, and of course then we got the bearing on top, so it's completely sandwiched between 2 bearings with a bearing spacer there. And this side, again, this goes in the bearing bushing, but on this side I've created a hex hole so that the 1.5 inch by 5/16 inch bolt sits in there and then gets sandwiched between the 2 bearings. So there's no plastic touching throughout the drum until you get to the head of the bolt, but there's a lot there to soak up heat, and a big surface of plastic I don't think will ever be a problem. It wasn't a big problem the other way, but this way it should definitely not be. And then of course we've got our bearing brace that goes on top of all of that, and nice sturdy unit. Can't turn it because the motor's on there right now, but everything turns smooth, and I'm really happy with this setup. Now I'll show you how to install the gearbox. First we start with the motor. The 2 close uprights are the top, the far ones are the bottom, and the motor points to the bottom. So you'll place the motor on there. you need 4 3mm by 6mm screws, and those items are in the list. Unfortunately, the motor does not come with them. Okay, next thing we'll do is take the center gear. It is the one that has a flat spot on the in the hole, and you need to line it up with that flat spot on the shaft. So I usually just turn it on there and gently give it a turn until it slides down, and then just push it down until it stops. Next, on the right side is the cartridge drum, axle, and gear. So we'll take the cartridge drum axle, slide a bearing over it, and then a bearing spacer, and then take the gear with the elevated side down, because that's the other side. The bearing spacer is already molded in, printed into it. Put those together, so now you should have a gap, the bearing spacer on each side. Place a bearing into the hole and place it on the shaft. Now for the left side, for the drum gear, again, place a bearing in there. Here is the drum gear with the bearing spacer, again, already printed onto it. So the large hex hole will be up. Next comes the drum axle, which is a 5/16 by 1.5 inch bolt. You will put a bearing spacer over the bolt, followed by the 4th bearing, and then just insert it into the hex of the gear. Now we have the bearing brace. Just put it over the top, and with your fingers you just need to pinch on each of the posts and the bearing to make sure they're all seated. I go around a couple times. You should hear nothing go down anymore. And your gearbox is complete. Now let's talk about the construction of the box. In the instructions are the dimensions for each piece of wood that you need to cut out, with all dimensions. This here is a side view, of course, of the front. And so I'm not going to do all that for you, but I'll just show you the components. Here is the most of it already put together. I've already done the sides, the front, the bottom, and I just got the top taped on right now because I want to show you something else later for it. And then of course you have the back door with the hole that will close up like this. And the most important piece is the front panel. Now, in your instructions you will have 2 template pieces. Like this, how they go. This is the left side, this is the right side. I wanted it to fit on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so making it full size of both sides, it'd take a large piece of paper. So what you do, you follow the instructions on here and you cut out these 2 squares, which is the template, and the instructions on here explain that. Remember, on the left side here, you need to leave this extra box I have, because that is where you're going to overlap this side, and it just gives you some purchase to tape to. So on this one it says overlap for taping right side template. So you actually want to cut out here and follow the outside line. So when you get those 2 cut, this is what you will have. Now what you'll do is you'll take the right side and place it over the left side and line up. What I generally do is I move it inward like this so that I've only got one visible line, one black line. Then you should have one black line there and one there. Disregard this one on there. This one's just a demo piece. But this should be a straight line also. So this dotted center line should line up. And then when you've got that, you get a piece of tape. You're going to tape them together. And then you'll get your front face piece of wood and you will line them up on here. The sides should be the exact size piece of wood. Get you some tape. Tape it around on each side. And then what you will do is you'll take something sharp. I have a center punch, but you can use a nail and place it carefully on the center of each of those little X's on all of these holes, and just give a light tap to put an indent for your bit to start. And I've marked on here what size hole this has to be. This looks like a double hole, but it's an 1/8 inch hole, but what the outside hole is showing the taper, because these motor mount holes need to have a taper so your tapered screw will fit flush, so nothing will touch it from the other side. And so here's an example of, so this is mine. I did to make this hole, and as you see, you just take and you drill right through the paper and follow those instructions, and when you're done, you should have something looking like this, except for the mistake I made, which is a hole right there. But just kind of, I was prototyping, and this was the hole for this old hopper. But as I found out later, when I went to put the electronics on there, the electronics hit that. So I had to redesign the hopper like this. And so now that gives me room on the back that's away from the electronics. So that there has been fixed. But this is what you should come out with. Tapered holes, 5/8 inch holes here. And yeah, just follow the instructions and you shouldn't have any problem. When I'm putting the box together, I generally glue the pieces and I put these tiny finishing nails. It's up to you how you want to make your box. In fact, your box does not have to be this size. I could take a piece of wood that's thicker or thinner or even larger size. As long as you place your template on their way, how you want it to be. Like if this, picture this being a bigger piece of wood. If I wanted it right there, as long as you put your holes there, everything will fit where you want it. So you're not limited to the box that I have. It's just my recommendation. I like a small footprint. Okay, I'm going to go over with you guys best way to find the absolute center of your drum. This is a 2x5 inch Fat Daddy's cake pan, of course, which is on the list of what I recommend you using. And there are many videos on the internet to show you how to find the center of a circle. What causes it to be a problem on this cake pan is you have a little bit of a radius here, and most of the examples on the internet are with nice square edges of, I don't have an example, but it's something round that's square and you can actually measure from to get a center. So the best way to, let me back up. The drilling of this hole, it's best done before you cut the cake pan, in my opinion, because this rim really gives it a good stout pan to work with, because once you cut this off to the size you need, it obviously becomes a little more flimsy because this large lip is gone. So the best way to find the center is to use a center finding tool. There are Many of them you can get hardware store, Amazon. You can find center finding tools. But as a convenience, I went ahead and made one that if you so choose to include it in the parts kit, this is my center finding tool that I made specifically for this. And to show you how to do it, I mean, it's obviously, but it's a couple tricks to make it simpler is when you put it on here, make sure these two poles are exactly against the edge. You know, if one's off, of course, it won't be in the exact center. Don't put so much pressure on it. They flex. You just want to set it against there. Make sure it doesn't tilt or anything. And then somewhere near the center, you don't have, you can draw a line all the way across if you want, but you don't have to. If you just somewhere near the center, and a nice sharp pencil does the best. It can be done with a dull one, but the sharper the better. And so what I like to do is I like to make a line across the center. I always turn mine 180 degrees, and it doesn't have to be lined up perfectly, but somewhere near 180 degrees off, make another line. And what this is doing is you can't make up for the width of the pencil lead. So if you'll see here, if I get real close, you can see that there are actually two lines there. And between those lines is actually the center. So to continue this, we're going to go 90 degrees off of those two lines. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect 90 degrees, but I'm going to draw another line. So to make this the most accurate, I suggest at least 4 lines. If you want, you can do more and it will still narrow down the center there. But when you look at it, let's see if I can get close here. When you look at it, the center is going to be between these two lines and these two lines. So, come on, focus. Obviously, right in there is going to be your center. And then what I do is, because this is softer aluminum, I'm going to take a punch and I'm gonna mark that. Now you can either use here's a center punch. Here is an automatic center punch that has recoil, which I'll show you on here in a minute, and or you can use a nail if you don't. You just need something to make a sharp point. And what I suggest is you put it on. Here's just a piece of an old 4x4, but I suggest you put it on something, because when you strike down, you have there's a chance that you're going to make this pan concave, and we want it to stay flat. And the same goes for when you're going to drill that hole. When you drill the hole, I always put it on something, so when you're pressing with the drill, you're not making a little bit concave. And if you do happen to make a little bit concave, you can usually come in here with your thumbs and go back around and get it as flat as possible. But that's another reason to do all this with this nice firm rim on there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my center punch and I'm going to find the exact center right there, and you see how it put that dimple right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like an 1/8 inch drill, and I'm going to start with an 1/8 inch drill, because if on my version 3 annealer, it requires a 5/16 inch hole, and my previous versions had a 3/8 inch hole. And the reason for the smaller 5/16 is because it is now going to go through a bearing, of which I'll explain in another video. But I always start small, like with an 1/8 inch, because if you go straight to 5/16, there's still a chance it'll walk out of this little dimple, and you want this exactly straight so you don't have a wobble when it's running. My version 3 machine will be a little more forgiving if you do have a wobble, because I've expanded the two drums apart a little bit more. But then I'll do an 1/8 and then I'll probably go to like 3/16, and then I'll do the quarter. It just, unless you got a step drill. If you got a step drill, then you can just go ahead and step on down. Okay, I got the 5/16 hole drilled exactly in the center of my pan. Now what we need to do is we need to get the correct depth of pan. So according to the instructions, it's 1 3/8 from the bottom of the pan out. That's where I suggest starting. Depending on what you load, will be totally up to you. Like if you primarily do 300 blackout, for example, you might want to come back to like maybe an inch or so. If you primarily do 300 Win Mag or 30-06 or something, you might want to start with a little pan. But what I found out is that for 1 3/8, I can easily do 223 all the way out to 300 Winchester Magnum, because the heavy weight of the case is in the back, so it will always want to go to the back. And even though the 30-06 will be hanging out quite a ways, it still does it fine. So if you do 300 blackout, for example, you might want to have a separate pan just for that one. Or if you happen to do 300 blackout on up to 223 or a little bit longer cartridges, then yeah, you can start with a short one, and that will probably work with everything you have. But so that's up to you. So I'm going to do a 1 3/8 inch thickness. And so what I do is I typically, let me see. Oh, another thing, you want to set the pan like this because we're going to be measuring up. Don't set it like this. You'll be cutting it really thin. So what I do, I get a book, and I'll put a pencil in this example. And for this particular book, page 105 is exactly a 1 3/8 inch. And I will bring this down and show you. So if I took my, if I took my measuring tape right there, 1 3/8 inch is the tip of that pencil. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold lightly on the book so that it does not move on me, so the pencil does not move. And I'm just going to bring the pan up to it, and I'm just going to draw all the way around. Okay. There you see I have a 1 3/8 inch line from the bottom to there, all the way around. Now all I need to do is take it out the shop and cut it. I'm going to use a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. There's several things you can do. I've tried hacksawing it. It is tough with a hacksaw, but it can be done. You just got to do kind of a piece at a time and just work in a groove. Don't try to start here and cut all the way through. You're just going to start initially with a groove. In fact, even with the cutoff wheel on my Dremel, I'm going to start following that line with a groove, and then the second time around will be a lot easier to follow. Also, one other thing, after you drill this hole, if there are any burrs on either side, you want to remove those too, because when you tighten it down with the washer, that burr might hold it off kilter just a little bit. Okay, I've went ahead and cut my drum down to the 1 3/8 inch, and this can go in the garbage. Now the next thing we got to do is we got to cut our 1 inch slot for the cartridges to drop in. So what I do is I've already marked mine, but you essentially, any ruler, just put it on there, and of course, you know, I just marked, you know, straight across. It doesn't have to be at the radius, but 1 inch, a 1 inch mark. And then what I do is I take my square and hold it against the base. I would suggest not to do this, because if your cut is not perfectly square, then your lines will probably be crooked. See if I can do this holding it, but Just going to draw 2 square lines all the way down. Okay, again, I'll go back out to my Dremel, and a hacksaw does work pretty good on this, but I'm going to cut all the way down to the base. And you see we've got this radiused lip. When this cutout is gone, that lip needs to be totally gone. So in other words, the outside edge of this will be exactly flat with this going out, because if it's not, then a cartridge, base of a cartridge could catch on it and flip it crooked. So I'll go take care of that. Okay, the cake pan is done. There's my 1-inch notch. A couple tips. So I just did the 2 cuts like this, and you don't have to worry about cutting along here, because once you got those 2 cuts, if you'll just take this piece in your fingers and work it back and forth about 5-6 times, it'll just break off, and then you just got to clean up this edge. As you see, I have this edge that's perfect with the bottom. Another tip, I would put I put a piece of duct tape, but just put you some tape in here, because you're going to have to take your file and file this smooth, and it just prevents this from getting all scratched up, of which I've done an old one, but it's just cosmetic. It doesn't have to be. But there we are. We're all done with the pan. Now I'm going to mount it. Now let's go ahead and assemble the annealer to the face. So what I do is I just take the gearbox and lay it down, and I start the 2 outside screws, tapered screws. And I run them down until they just barely stick out. And that allows me to take the gearbox, and I can already set them on those holes and get it going. See, so it's already in place. Turn it over, set it down, tighten these 2 screws. Now when you tighten these down, you just want to make them tight enough that you have no more gap back there. So I have a slight gap. I can still see. You don't need to really cinch them down and strip anything out. There just needs to be all the gap taken up. Okay, next we'll take the hopper. The hopper is held on by 2 1/4-inch bolts and 1 machine screw, and you don't need washers. It's up to you if you want to put washers on the back, but I don't use them. So this screw here is similar to tapered ones, and you can use a tapered one if you happen to get a pack of 12 or whatever, but I've just got a small head screw so it doesn't really interrupt with the cartridges laying in here. Then, oops, let me back up. Missed an important thing. 2 hopper spacers. You got to have, or actually 3 when the screw up there, but you got to have the hopper spacers. So it should look like that with a gap behind, because it's necessary to bring these parts on this side a little further out than the drum so it doesn't accidentally hit the lip of the drum when the cartridges are going in. And these can just be finger tight. I've never tightened these with a wrench. The only 2 I tighten with the wrench is the arm and the ramp. Okay, one more item. I put this spacer up here, then I just squeeze to kind of keep it from falling down in, and line up the hole and put the screw in. Okay, next is the ramp. The ramp also has a spacer in the back with a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch bolt. And that goes on the back, and when everything gets together, we'll just adjust this where it needs to be. But it is adjustable both in how far away from the drum and also the angle of the ramp that you might want it to be. But right now we'll just set it here. Okay, and once you've got that motor on the back, it will just stand like this. So next thing we'll do is take the drum. Take one of the 5/16 inch bolts, screw it on down. Now, this will fit in the hole. This is what makes the adjustability. On my old version 2, my printed plastic piece kept the drum a certain distance away. I suggest 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch away from the face to start off with, but this is adjustable. You'll be able to adjust the drum in and out because this will now go on here with a flat washer, which I provide, and another nut. And then, so now there's the adjustable gap in the back. Okay, and as far as, if I can find my piece, so this is what you also get from me. This is one of the key features of this, because it's adjustable for your cartridge size, however you would like it. This one here is primary for 223 size cartridges. This is for 308 and 30-06 size cartridges. And this is for larger, I forget, there's a, like 300 Winchester Magnum and so forth. But if you're not familiar with my product, there is the magnets on the back that allow that. If you ever take these apart, when you put them back together, make sure the magnets are not opposing each other, because if you do, it'll slam and possibly maybe break the magnets, but you just need to go in between and then allow it to turn. And this just slides over that shaft. Now, as far as indexing, I generally have this up at 12 o'clock and this slot over at 3 o'clock. The timing will never change unless the drum slips, but the main thing is, as long as this dumps a cartridge onto this ramp before the slot comes back around, you're good to go. Okay, now the electronics. You will get this, I think I already threw it away, but this comes in a black housing with a red cover. All you do is get a screwdriver and pop this out of that cover. So this is all you want. The cover is garbage. It's way too big for this. It would take up this whole spot here. But go ahead and unplug the switch and the rheostat, and they can only go in one spot, so you don't have to keep track. On the front here, it says motor and power right here. Power positive. Once you put this on, you won't be able to read it. So I just took that positive sign and I wrote it there so I know which is the positive power for this. You then just, if you cut your hole a little small, you might need to file it, but when it goes in, it should fit perfect like that. Another side note, on here, I've already clipped them off, but there are leads where they soldered them on. I just took my clippers and I clipped all those off, because if you don't, it'll hit and it'll sit crooked. So I think there was 6 of them there and 4 of them there, but once you've got that all smooth, this will fit in there real nice. Now what you can do is, I'll leave it up to you. You can either take 2 small screws and put them at one in an opposing corner, or you can just take hot glue and put some hot glue on there and keep it in. Next, you'll take your on-off switch and take off the nut. Now, it does come with this lock washer. Go ahead and leave it off, because as you'll see when I get this on there, there's just enough threads for the nut. So feed it in to the hole on the right. Put your nut over the wire. And again, you can just do this with your fingers. You can just hand tighten it. So that switch is in there. Now you take the rheostat, you pull off the knob. Again, it comes with a washer. I don't use a washer because you're going to have very limited threads. Take the nut off. Now I'll show you what I had to do here. If you put this through here normal, like if you stop right there, you'll have to do a couple things. One, you won't have enough threads to put the nut on. But if you elected just to slide that on there, it would still function, but it's barely on. So you'd either have to trim off the edge of this knob to slide on further, or what I did is I took a 3/4 Forstner bit, and this wood is very easy to work with, but I countersunk it halfway, and then I needed to make room for the 3 wires coming out, so I just took my knife and I just whittled it right there so that it fits right in there like that. And then now, as you see, I have enough threads for the nut. And the knob. Okay, of course I didn't glue this in, so it fell out, but once you get it mounted, obviously it'll stay there. Okay, then just take the 2 cables and connect them back on there. Next, we'll take the cartridge holding arm. Now, this is one that I bent myself. So, in the instructions, you will have this template. This is a 1-for-1. So, if you wanted, I actually use this template. I took it on the shop, and I lay this is a 1/4 inch straight rod. And so the rod will be sticking out here. I literally lay it on here, and I mark right here where the bend's going to be. I put it in my vise and I bend it, and I lay it on there and do another mark. But you see how if you do it that way, this is actual size of the arm. So I just use this for the bending. This bend right down here, it's a 20-degree bend, but obviously everyone's not going to bend it perfectly, but this part needs to be at about 5 to 5:30 right here. And if you're bend that it's too long, and for example you're hitting like that, the purpose of this bend here is you bend it however you need to, so that it is only like a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch away from the drum. Should be about like, obviously over here, but about that distance away. Just make that bend so that this will be where you need it. So I'm going to install that next. Put a 1/4 inch nut on it. About right there. Slide it into the hole. And take another 1/4 inch nut for the opposite side. And this is what you'll use to adjust it. And it doesn't need adjusted all the time. In fact, once you got it set, you shouldn't have to adjust it all. So you're looking for about 5 to 530. Let me get my wrench. So, for example, I'm going to tighten that down right there. So you're looking at about 530. It should be resting in there, and it should be rolling. If this was too high where the cartridge was kind of going under it, you might see the cartridge not even spin. And that might mean you need to move it down a little bit more or adjust that bend so that you're in this area. If you're too far down, it has to rest against that bar to spin, because if it's down here, your cartridge probably will not spin. Also, look at this distance here. It should not protrude out the front, and you should have like a 1/16 of an 1/8 of an inch behind there. And to adjust that distance, that's where, of course, you will use these two nuts to adjust the distance that you need. So essentially, other than power and, of course, our torch holder, this thing is finished and ready to go. This can almost anneal. So I showed you my box earlier. So I complete my box to this point. And now to test things before it's all completed together, and by all means you could put it together and do the testing, but this is just how I do it. I set it on there like that. I stand it up, and now we just need power before we finish this box up. So back here, I'm going to go ahead and you make sure you know which is positive, and in this case here, positive is on the left, because the center stem, if you want to do a continuity check, and I wrote a plus and minus on mine, so the positive is on the left, but I do a continuity check with my multimeter to make sure. And then remember, we put a positive and minus up there where I wrote it. So I'm going to do this off camera. I'm going to connect my positive wires here, or my two wires here, and I'll be right back. Okay, what I did is I went ahead and put the positive wire here, negative wire there from the power supply, and then you connect two wires from the motor. And what I did not show you, but down here they will need to be, I just stuck them on there right now, but I will solder those. But one way you got to put connectors on the end or solder them onto there. Now, your motor, both drums must turn counterclockwise. So if when you turn this thing on and you find that they are turning clockwise, you just need to come up here, undo these two wires, and just reverse them. So positive and negative is not important there. It's just going to be the direction that the motor runs. So let me get the power connected, and I'll be right back. Okay, we got the power plugged in, and when you plug in that motor wire, you've got a 50-50 chance. And mine was backwards. Mine was turning clockwise. So I undone them, and now it turns clockwise. So if I turn it on, everything's turning as it should. When you look here, the back of your feed ramp should be behind the hopper so that the cartridge falls straight down in. And let me stop it over here. And your ramp, let me slide this down here. I shouldn't do that because I just loosened the nut. But as you see, when there's a cartridge on this ramp right here, it should be, the ramp should be a little bit ahead of the drum so that it does not catch the lip. And like I was saying before, another part of my video is you can loosen this nut, and the nut on the back side, you can draw it out. This here is kind of a large gap, so I might draw that out another 1/16 inch or so. But that is adjustable now since we have the two nuts on there. Another thing I want to comment on, I don't tighten this nut super tight, because if something does hang up, like a cartridge gets hung up somewhere, something's got to give, and it's nice that the drum gives and slips. So it needs to be tight enough that it doesn't slip, but don't bear down on it. Okay, let's go ahead and do a little test here. Let me select for 223, and I've got some right here. Come here. We'll see how that does. Oh, hold on, I haven't adjusted the ramp. Okay, I got the ramp adjusted, so it's just, you just want it real close to the drum, but you don't want it to rub. Let's turn this on and try it again. One thing also on this version, I have a wiper there that just disrupts the cartridges so that they don't create a bridge. And on this version, I made it bigger, which I couldn't do on the old one because I ran out of room. The two drums are now a 1/4 inch more apart, so that allows more room for growth. Where if you have a little wobble in your drum, now there's room to play right there. So that's a big benefit. Okay, now I'm going to throw some 30-06 cartridges on there. Just to kind of show you how versatile this is. This will do 45/70s, and this will do most calibers without adjustment. You see, I'm using all I did is adjust the cartridge holder there, but it holds 30-06 just fine, even though they're sticking out there. In fact, I want to show you something, how versatile this machine is. I know there's a competitor one that touts how adjustable it is for the drum. Honestly, I don't think the adjustable drum for depth is all that important. Let me take these off here. So I have a 408 Shaytac. Here's a 30-06. There's a Shaytac. It doesn't fit in here because it's too big and I don't even have the gun. But you can still feed them one at a time, just like a competitor's machine. And it still stays in there. I can anneal that. In fact, I can even get ready to the next one, just like his machine does. And works great. In fact, if you had some big oddball cartridge that didn't fit in my slots, you can actually take the drum off and go ahead and run it, and then you're just down to a single feed, but it's still capable of doing it. And I know he touts his to do 50 cal brass, which I don't know anyone that even has one, even though I do. But the drum would need to be a little bit bigger for this one. I mean, it'll hold there, but it needs to be a little bigger so that it doesn't fall out. But you see, it doesn't take much of a drum to hold a cartridge there. So, okay, we have one more part to put together for this build. So this is the turnbuckle that holds the torch. Becomes a torch holder. I like this one because it's the only one that I've found. It's flat on both sides, so it easily, I don't have my torch here, but the torch easily goes on there versus the rounded ones that are kind of concave. But what you want to do in here is, so we're going to take apart this turnbuckle. This, of course, becomes the torch holder. So it'll be in here like this, holding the torch down. And then that's where this spacer, because we run out of threads, that's what this spacer here is for. And then you would put your the wing nut on there. And then that's what you'll use to adjust the torch from side to side. Okay, now the eyelet piece, remember, the opposite end is a left-hand thread. So you have two options. You can either buy another bolt to mount this on here, and I use this because it's available and it's easy to reach in there and adjust if I need to. But the thing you got to remember is when you put it in there, that when you loosen and tighten it, remember it's a left-hand thread. So to screw this on, I'm going to go this way. If that really confuses you and you want a normal bolt, just turn it over and use this side, because we're not going to use that side out here anyway. But I'm going to elect to use that. And so what I like to do is I will put this here as your torch spacer to keep it away from the wall. So it's a square hole to match that right there. I then put a washer over the top because of these tapers here, that will dig into your wood. So you need a washer on there so it's got something to work against. Then I have 3 holes here based on your torch. In fact, depending on your torch, you might even have drill additional one further or closer. But I put those 3 on my template. But I'm going to go for the middle one and stick this on here and turn it opposite, of course. And I'll show you here in a second. Okay, so, and I'm losing my pieces. That's what it looks like on the inside, and as you see, I can just reach in here and grab that end, and it's good to tighten that with. And I've lost my top. So, now there's your torch holder. I will use, I'm going to use this as my torch. So you'll then stick that over your torch. And tighten it down. Now from this point, you can obviously adjust your torch like this, or you can adjust it like this. I always like my flame pointing just a little bit away from the drum to keep it from overheating. And of course this screwdriver has a taper on it. And you can also adjust in and out for different length cartridges. So let me take a look. I think we are done. Okay, 2 more pieces. These pieces are for the handle. I've got a hole on each side that perfectly matches a 30 caliber case. Maybe I don't. I need to adjust that. Anyway, they will go up here. You can either use a dowel, wooden dowel, your metal rod that you had, but you want them close to the front, and the reason why they're coming forward is so that they will balance evenly. In fact, all we have left on this machine now is obviously I need to fasten and glue all the wood pieces to include this face. Now that I know everything works, get it on there. And if you want, of course, you need to paint it. In my case, I'll take everything apart and I'll paint it the color I want. But for the sake of time, I just cut these pieces out and I wanted to get it together for you. But you can leave a wood if you want. It doesn't really matter. Let me grab my other one and I will show you what I mean by the handle. So this is my old one, my 2.2 version. See how I took 2 30-06 cartridges and I just put a sheet metal screw in there and screwed them together after I drilled the primer pocket a little bit bigger, and so that they fit the 30 caliber holes. And in fact, there's my torch still on this one. This is a knob I had in my stuff, so that's what I used instead of a wing nut. But But that should do it. I can't think of anything else. Oh yeah, two more things I need to mention real quick. If I turned it around, and I don't have these printed out, so I can't show you, but these are the holders for the back door. On this one, I only have 3, but 4 comes in the kit because I find when I push on this corner here, I accidentally open the hole. But what I did on the opposite side, I just took pieces of metal and kind of made an indent there and glued them on. And of course, those oppose the magnets. And then it stays on. And the other thing that I forgot to mention is the power supply. Now, this piece here comes with that power supply I recommend. And this holder comes in the kit that I print out. And so it's made to, you put a hole over here and slide that in. And then this, with a couple screws, holds it in there real nice and tight. Okay. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment. Thank you.